Hey everyone. So a few years back, I saw this video on YouTube of Chris Coleman playing at a drum clinic, and someone had asked him a question about the whole gospel chops thing that became really popular, I'd say in like the late 2000s or early teens. And he talked about kind of his background growing up with a bunch of other church drummers and playing in a group together, jamming after church and stuff, and pushing each other and getting better that way. It's actually a pretty funny video if you haven't seen it. I'll put a link in the description for you if you want to check it out for yourself. But he also plays some examples of different ideas. If you haven't seen the whole gospel chops thing before, it essentially is like different linear drumming ideas. And it sort of stems from the stuff that guys like Dave Weckl and Vinnie Colaiuta would play back in the day. They're sort of the godfathers of the whole thing. So anyway, Chris starts playing examples of different linear combinations to get started with, and then he plays some demonstrations of these linear fills that he improvises in different subdivisions like triplets, 16th notes, 32nd notes. So at one point, he busts out this crazy 32nd note fill just on the spot, and the audience really can't do anything but clap and laugh after having their faces melted off, and I pretty much had the same reaction when I saw it for the first time. Now here we are today, and I happened to see the video again, and I decided this time that I wanted to see if I could try to sit down and figure out what was going on there. So after watching him play the fill over and over and over and over again, I feel that I was able to get a pretty accurate transcription of it, and then I was able to take it to the kit and try to learn it for myself. And now that I've figured it out for myself, I'm going to show it to you guys so you can try it out if you like. So before we jump into the specific fill that he played, I wanted to talk a bit about kind of my philosophy when it comes to learning different licks. I don't personally find it all that useful to just sit down and learn a lick and then just try to add it to a vocabulary of different licks that you've learned over the years so that you can try to kind of pull them out of your brain on the spot when you play. I think it's much more useful when you're sitting down to learn different licks or fills to really break them down and look at the different concepts that are being applied to create those fills. Once you have those concepts figured out, then you can use them to create maybe similar sounding fills, but ones that have your own stamp on them, and then you'll be able to improvise a lot more freely than you would be able to if you're just learning this lick and then that lick and then this next lick and then another lick by this drummer that I like, and so on. The thing is, with this fill, Chris Coleman just improvised it on the spot. It's not something that he sat down and planned out before he did the drum clinic. It's all just made up. So while I am going to be showing you the specific fill and breaking it down for you, I'm also going to be talking about the different ideas that Chris is using to come up with the fill on the spot, and how you can use them to create your own cool linear drum fills. All right, now that we've got that out of the way, let's get into it. So we've got a 3-bar fill here, and what I'm going to do is go through it 2 beats at a time, nice and slow so you can really see what I'm doing. And then at the end of that, I'll play through the whole thing in one go, nice and slow, and then I'll play it at a couple faster tempos as well. The first thing to note here is that we are not starting on 1 for this. This fill actually starts on the and of 4 with kind of a lead in, which is just 4 single strokes on the hi-hat. So in time, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1. So including the 4 lead-in notes on the and of 4, the first 2 beats sound like this. Okay, and then the next 2. Okay, now the first 2 beats of the second measure. And then the last 2 beats of the second measure. and then the first two beats of the third measure. And then finally, the last two beats of the third measure. All right, now I'll play through the whole thing nice and slow. All right, and now a bit faster. Okay, and now I can't play this quite as fast as Chris Coleman can, but I will try to play it reasonably up to tempo. All right, so now we get to what I consider to be the most important part of all of this. You know, that's a pretty crazy sounding fill, but if we break it down into just the really basic ideas that are being applied, there's really actually nothing super complicated about it. It's just that Chris Coleman is able to execute these ideas at a really high level. When you take a close look at this fill, you realize that it's actually just a bunch of really simple hand-foot combinations, a lot of which you've probably seen before. Let's go ahead and go through each of them. The first one is going to be probably the most basic one that just about everybody learns when they're starting to learn bass drum doubles for the first time. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with it. It's just the simple right, left, kick, kick. Okay, and then the next one, if we take that same four-stroke phrase and just start with the kick drum, we get this. And then for the next one, if we move the two bass drum strokes into the middle of the phrase, you get this. And finally, if you play the bass drum strokes at the beginning and end of each phrase, you get this. Next, we have some three-note phrases. The first one is very simple, and I'm sure you've seen it before as well. It's just right, left, kick. And then the next variation on that, you just move the bass drum stroke to the beginning. And the final variation of that is moving the kick drum stroke into the middle. Okay, and now we move on to six-stroke phrases. So the first one is just four singles, right, left, followed by two kick drum strokes. And then if we move the bass drum strokes to the beginning, and of course you get the idea with the rest of these, you just move the bass drum strokes around. So for instance, you could play the bass drum strokes in the middle of the phrase. Another pretty common one, but one that's actually a little trickier to play, is just alternating singles between the hand and the foot. So if you start with just your right hand and your kick drum, or you can do it with your left hand, or you can alternate. All right, and finally we have one that you don't hear talked about as often, but it's basically the same thing as the first group of 4-stroke phrases that we were talking about, but you're playing a unison with your hands. So and you can play all the same variations with that as well. If you're brand new to playing hand-foot combinations like these, and you've never really messed around with them before, I would recommend just starting out with your hands on a single surface like the snare drum or the hi-hat, so that you can really focus on the pattern itself. And then once you get a little bit comfortable with the patterns, then you can start applying them around the drum set. When you're ready to start applying these combinations to the drum set, I would just start with some really basic exercises like going around the drums kind of in a circular motion. So for instance, if we take that very first exercise, it would be something like, and of course do that with all the other combinations as well. Once you're fairly comfortable with the patterns, and maybe you've messed around with playing the patterns individually around the drum set, then you can start combining them, and that's really when things will start to open up for you. You want to start working your way around the drums and improvising combinations of these different patterns, and start nice and slow, something like, if you spend a good amount of time working on this kind of stuff, you'll get to a point where you can just sort of improvise these, crazy sounding linear fills on the spot. And that's really the ultimate goal here. So for instance, if I play something like, that's just improvised on the spot, and that just comes from, like I said, it's just a matter of messing around with that kind of stuff and repeating and repeating and repeating. So spend some time with this stuff, mess around with it, have fun with it. It's a lot of fun to play this kind of stuff, and really try to push yourself. Try to break away from just the simple. Experiment with these different combinations, shorten the lengths of the fills, extend the fills, play them in different parts of the bar. There are really just endless possibilities that you can come up with using these things. Okay, that is going to do it for this one. I hope that you guys found this info helpful, and I hope it helps you advance your playing. Thanks, guys.